I stared at my phone screen, dust from the Afghan desert still coating my fingers, as the words blurred through my tears. I want a divorce. I've already filed the paperwork. Don't bother coming home to the house, it's mine now. I've moved on. 5 years of marriage ended in a 3-paragraph email while I was 7,000 miles away, fighting for my country. I didn't know then that karma had a surprise waiting for both of us. The desert heat suddenly felt suffocating as I sat on my cot in the crowded barracks. 3 months left in my deployment, and my life back home had just imploded. My hand shook as I scrolled through the email again, searching for any hint of the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had promised to wait for me. I've moved your things to a storage unit, she wrote. I've paid for 3 months. After that, it's your problem. Cold. Calculating. Like I was just another task to check off her to-do list before starting her new life. I met Sarah during my first leave after enlisting. She was tending bar at a place just off base, all bright smiles and attentive eyes. When I told her I was shipping out in 2 weeks, she didn't seem fazed. I'll write to you, she promised. And she did. For months, her letters were my lifeline, filled with small details about her day, quotes from books she was reading, even pressed flowers from her mother's garden. We got married during my next leave, a small ceremony with just her parents and my dad in attendance. I'll wait for you, always, she had whispered during our first dance. Now, for deployments later, always had an expiration date. The guys in my unit noticed something was wrong immediately. I'd always been the one with the steady hand, the one who kept morale up when things got rough. You look like you've seen a ghost, Jackson, Rodriguez said, dropping onto the cot next to mine. I handed him my phone without a word. His face darkened as he read. That's cold, man. That's ice cold. He was right. It wasn't just the divorce, it was doing it like this, when she knew I couldn't respond, couldn't fight for us, couldn't even properly process what was happening. Sleep evaded me that night, and the next, and the next. I performed my duties mechanically, my mind constantly drifting back to that email. I couldn't reach her, she had blocked my number. My emails bounced back. Her parents wouldn't answer my calls. It was as if I died, and everyone had already moved on. Captain Lewis noticed my distraction during patrol and pulled me aside. Whatever's going on with you, fix it or compartmentalize it, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. I need you focused out here. We all do. I nodded, swallowing hard. He was right. My personal apocalypse couldn't matter out here, where actual lives were at stake. I pushed it down, buried it deep, and forced myself to focus on the mission. I'd deal with the wreckage of my marriage when I got home. The remaining months of my deployment passed in a blur of sand, sweat, and suppressed rage. By the time our transport touched down on American soil, I had convinced myself I was prepared for whatever awaited me. I was wrong. My father met me at the airport, his weathered face drawn with concern. At 68, Dad looked older than the last time I'd seen him, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. Son, was all he said before pulling me into a fierce hug. I dropped my duffel bag and hugged him back, feeling like a child again, wanting someone else to make the monsters go away. She took everything, didn't she? I asked as we drove toward his house. The old pickup truck smelled of cigarettes and pine air freshener, comfortingly familiar. Dad's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Pretty much. The house, well, you know it was in both your names, but she somehow got you to sign papers giving her full rights while you were gone. I never signed anything, I said, the first stirrings of a new anger building in my chest. Dad glanced at me, then back at the road. That's what I figured. Your signature looked off when her lawyer showed it to me. My stomach dropped. She forged my signature? Looks that way to me. But she moved fast, son. Real fast. By the time I realized what was happening, she had cleaned out your joint accounts, sold your car, even took that boat your grandfather left you. I leaned back against the headrest, trying to process this new betrayal. Did she leave anything? Just what was in that storage unit she mentioned. We can go there tomorrow, see what's left. He paused, then added quietly, and there's something else. Something she doesn't know about. I turned to look at him, noticing the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. What are you talking about, Dad? Your grandmother's inheritance. The one I've been managing for you until you turned 30 or completed your military service. Whichever came first. I blinked, memories stirring of conversations years ago, before I'd even met Sarah. Grandma Elise had left a trust for me, but I'd been so young when she died that the details had faded from my mind. With everything that had happened since, enlisting, meeting Sarah, multiple deployments, I'd forgotten about it entirely. How much? Dad's smile widened slightly. Enough. The original amount plus 20 years of smart investments. Let's just say you won't have to worry about starting over. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end after all. Maybe it was a beginning. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by baseball trophies and faded posters. Sleep came in fits and starts, my dreams filled with Sarah's face, sometimes loving, sometimes contemptuous. I woke early, the pale light of dawn barely filtering through the blinds. Dad was already up, the smell of coffee and bacon drawing me to the kitchen. Got a call from Jim Brooks last night, Dad said, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon toward me. Jim had been Dad's lawyer for decades, handling everything from his divorce from my mother to his retirement paperwork. What did he say? I asked, suddenly not hungry despite the appealing aroma of my father's cooking. Sarah's back in town. Apparently, she's been in Florida with her new boyfriend for the past month. They just got back yesterday. I set my fork down, my appetite completely gone now. New boyfriend. Dad hesitated, then sighed. Mike Townsend. You know him. The name hit me like a physical blow. Mike Townsend had been my friend since high school. He'd been at our wedding. Had helped me move furniture into the house Sarah and I bought together. Had promised to keep an eye on her during my deployments. That son of a bitch, I whispered, my hand curling into a fist on the table. Jim says they've been together at least 6 months, maybe longer. Mike moved into your house 2 weeks after you shipped out this last time. I pushed back from the table, needing to move, to do something with the sudden surge of energy coursing through me. I need to see her. Need to look her in the eyes when she tries to explain this. Dad stood too, his expression concerned. Are you sure that's wise? Jim says we should let him handle everything, especially if that signature was forged. This isn't about legal proceedings, Dad. This is about me needing answers. I paced the small kitchen, my mind racing. I gave her everything. Everything. And she threw it away like it was nothing. Dad didn't try to stop me, just nodded slowly. I understand. But let's be smart about this. First, let's go see what's in that storage unit. Then we'll talk to Jim about your inheritance and how to protect it. After that, if you still want to confront her, I won't stand in your way. The storage unit was in a facility on the edge of town, a long row of identical metal doors baking in the morning sun. Unit 217. I hesitated before entering the code Sarah had included in her email, part of me dreading what I might find inside. The metal door rolled up with a screech, revealing a space barely 10 feet square, stacked with cardboard boxes and a few pieces of furniture. My entire life, condensed and discarded. Jesus, Dad muttered beside me. I stepped inside, running my hand over the top box. It was labeled kitchen in Sarah's neat handwriting. Next to it, a box marked photos. I opened that one first, needing to see if she'd at least left me our memories. The box contained photo albums and loose pictures, but as I flipped through them, I realized something strange. Every photo that included Sarah had been removed. It was as if she was systematically erasing herself from my history. Look at this, I said, showing Dad one of the albums. Pages with obvious gaps where photos had been carefully removed. She's thorough. I'll give her that, Dad said grimly. We spent the next hour sorting through the boxes. My clothes were there, though many of my favorite items were missing. My books had made the cut, as had my collection of vintage vinyl records. But anything of real value was gone. My grandfather's watch, the signed baseball I'd treasured since childhood, even the custom knife set I'd splurged on after my first deployment bonus. She took all the good stuff, I said, sitting on an overturned milk crate, surrounded by the leftovers of my life. Not everything, Dad reminded me. She didn't know about the inheritance. And she doesn't know about this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I recognized it immediately, my grandmother's engagement ring. The one she left specifically for the woman who captures Alexander's heart. I'd given it to Sarah on our wedding day. How did you get this? I asked, taking the box with trembling hands. She tried to sell it. Went to Grayson's jewelry downtown. Old Bill Grayson recognized it immediately. Remembered when your grandfather bought it for your grandmother back in '52. He called me instead of making the sale. Dad looked fiercely proud of this small victory. Some things, you just can't put a price on. I opened the box. The ring looked exactly as I remembered, a modest diamond surrounded by tiny sapphires on a white gold band. Nothing flashy, but beautiful in its simplicity. Sarah had cried when I gave it to her, had promised to treasure it always. Another lie to add to the growing list. Let's get what we want from here and leave the rest, I decided. I don't need these reminders. We loaded the books, records, and a few sentimental items into Dad's truck. then locked the unit behind us. As we drove away, I felt a strange lightness. The first step toward moving on, perhaps. Jim Brooks's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the interior modernized but still retaining its original character. The walls were lined with leather-bound law books that probably hadn't been opened in years, given that everything was computerized now. Jim himself looked exactly as I remembered. Tall, rail-thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual expression of mild amusement. "Alexander Jackson," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Welcome home, son. Sorry it's under these circumstances." "Thanks for seeing us on such short notice," I replied, taking a seat across from his imposing oak desk. "For Harold's boy? Anytime." He smiled at my father before turning serious. "Now, your dad's filled me in on the basics, but I need to hear from you about the signature business." I explained everything. The email, the blocked communications, the claim that I had signed over the house. Jim took detailed notes, his expression growing darker by the minute. "That's forgery, plain and simple," he said when I finished. "And fraud. And possibly a few other charges I could throw in if we wanted to make things really uncomfortable for your soon-to-be ex-wife." "I just want what's mine," I said. "And I want her to know she didn't break me." Jim nodded, understanding immediately. "Which brings us to the matter of your grandmother's inheritance. Harold, you have the paperwork?" Dad produced a thick folder from his battered briefcase. Jim flipped through it, nodding occasionally. "Everything appears to be in order. The trust matured last month, coinciding with the completion of your military service. The current value." He paused, looking up at me over his glasses. "Well, your father's been quite the investment wizard. The original sum of $200,000 has grown to just over $1.7 million. I nearly choked. $1.7 million? And change, Jim added with a small smile. Tax-free, I might add, thanks to the way your grandmother structured the trust. My head spun. I had known there was an inheritance, but the amount had never been discussed. I'd assumed it was modest, enough for a down payment on a house someday, maybe. Not life-changing money. "She can't touch this?" I asked, needing to be absolutely sure. "Not a penny," Jim assured me. "The trust was established long before your marriage, and your grandmother's will specifically excluded future spouses from any claim to it. It's ironclad." I sat back in my chair, letting the implications sink in. Sarah had taken everything she thought I had, not knowing that the real wealth had been quietly growing, protected from her greed. "What do you want to do, Alexander?" Jim asked after giving me a moment to process. "We could fight her on the house, the bank accounts, the personal property. With the forgery angle, we'd have a strong case." I thought about it. Thought about the months of legal battles that would follow, the ugly accusations, the dragging up of our private life for public consumption. Was it worth it? Let me talk to her first, I decided. After that, I'll know what I want to do. Jim looked skeptical but nodded. "Your call. But don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, and don't lose your temper." That's exactly what she'll be hoping for. I promised to behave, though inside, I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. The anger that had been building since that first email was a living thing now, clawing at my insides, demanding release. Dad drove me to what had once been our house, a modest two-story colonial in a quiet neighborhood just outside town. Sarah's red Audi was in the driveway, along with a black Jeep I recognized as Mike's. Seeing it there, so casually parked where my own car used to sit, sent a fresh wave of rage through me. "You want me to come with you?" Dad asked as I stared at the house. I shook my head. "No, this I need to do alone." "I'll wait here," he said. "If you're not back in 30 minutes, I'm coming in after you." I smiled despite myself. Dad, always the protector, even now. "I'll be fine." The walk to the front door felt surreal, like I was approaching a movie set of my former life rather than the actual place I'd called home. The garden I'd planted was overgrown, the blue hydrangeas Sarah had loved so much wilting in the summer heat. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, a small acknowledgement that this was no longer my home. Sarah opened the door, her expression changing from neutral to shocked in an instant. "Alex? What are you? We weren't expecting you for weeks." "Surprise," I said, my voice calm despite the storm inside me. "Mind if I come in?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder into the house. "Now's not really a good time. I think you owe me 15 minutes of your time, considering you ended our marriage via email." Her face hardened, the mask of civility slipping. This was the real Sarah, the one I'd apparently never truly known during our years together. "Fine. But make it quick. Mike will be back soon." A lie. Mike's Jeep was right there in the driveway. She knew I'd seen it. This was just another power play, Another attempt to hurt me. I stepped past her into the foyer, immediately noticing the changes. The walls had been repainted from the warm beige I'd chosen to a stark white. The family photos were gone, replaced by generic art prints. Even the furniture was different, modern, sleek pieces where our comfortable, slightly shabby items had been. "You've been busy," I observed, turning to face her. Sarah crossed her arms defensively. "What do you want, Alex? The divorce is happening whether you like it or not. I want to understand why. Why the email? Why not wait until I got home? Why take everything, even things that had no value to you but meant the world to me?" The questions I'd been holding in for months tumbled out. "Because I knew you'd try to talk me out of it," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You'd give me those sad puppy eyes and talk about working things out, and I'd end up wasting another year of my life waiting for you to come home from whatever godforsaken place the army sent you." Her callousness stunned me, even after everything. "So this is about my deployments? You knew what you were signing up for when we got married. You promised." "I was 23. She snapped. "What did I know about being a military wife? About spending holidays alone? About jumping every time the phone rang? Terrified it was someone calling to tell me you were dead? I grew up, Alex. I realized I wanted more than half a husband. And Mike? How long has that been going on?" A flash of guilt crossed her face, quickly replaced by defiance. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Sarah sighed, uncrossing her arms to push her hair back from her face. It was a gesture I'd once found endearing. Now it just seemed calculated, like everything else about her. 8 months. It started after your last leave. 8 months. While I was writing her letters from the desert, while I was fighting and watching friends die, while I was dreaming of coming home to her, she was falling in love with someone else. Not just someone else, my friend. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I know he's here." As if on cue, Mike appeared in the doorway to the living room. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him, and his usually short hair had grown out into what I supposed was meant to be a stylish cut. He looked nervous but determined. "Alex," he said, his voice steady. "I'm sorry you found out this way. Are you?" I asked, taking a step toward him. He flinched but held his ground. "Are you really sorry, or are you just saying what you think you're supposed to say?" "We didn't plan for this to happen," Sarah interjected. "It just did. And once we realized how we felt about each other, it seemed cruel to string you along." "Cruel?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Right. Because an email was the kind option. Taking everything I owned was an act of mercy." "You're being dramatic," Sarah said dismissively. "I left you your personal things. Everything else was joint property, including my grandfather's watch, my signed baseball, the knife set I bought with my own money before we were even dating." She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I may have been hasty with some things. And the house? The one you somehow got me to sign over to you while I was 7,000 miles away." Mike shifted uneasily, looking between us. "Sarah, what's he talking about?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just a misunderstanding about the paperwork." "It's called forgery, Sarah," I said, watching her face carefully. "And it's a felony." The color drained from her face. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can. Dad kept samples of my signature from various documents over the years, and I never signed anything remotely resembling a quitclaim deed while I was deployed. So either you forged it, or you got someone else to do it for you." Mike was staring at Sarah now, his expression a mix of shock and growing anger. "You said he agreed to let you have the house." "He would have," she insisted. "If I'd asked, he would have given it to me. I just expedited things." I looked at Mike, really looked at him. The friend I'd trusted, the man who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. But watching him absorb Sarah's casual admission of fraud, I realized something. He might be her next victim. "She's lying to you too," I said quietly. "If she'll forge my signature to steal my house, what will she do to you when something better comes along?" "Get out," Sarah hissed, her composed facade finally cracking. "Get out of my house before I call the police." "Your house," I repeated. "We'll see about that." I turned to leave, then paused, one final question burning in my mind. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me? Sarah's expression softened slightly, a glimpse of the woman I thought I'd married. "At the beginning, yes. I did love you, Alex. But people change." I changed. I nodded, accepting the most honest thing she'd said since I walked through the door. "I've changed too. More than you know." As I walked back to Dad's truck, I felt something unexpected, relief. The anger was still there, but it had transformed into something more constructive, a determination to move forward rather than dwell in the past. "How'd it go?" Dad asked as I climbed in beside him. About as well as could be expected, I said. She admitted to the forgery, though not in so many words. And she's been with Mike for 8 months. Dad's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'm sorry, son. Don't be, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. This isn't the end I expected, but maybe it's the one I needed. We drove in silence for a few minutes before Dad spoke again. What now? I thought about the inheritance waiting for me, about the clean slate I'd been unexpectedly given. Now we call Jim. Tell him I want to fight for the house, not because I want to live there. I don't, but because it's mine. And because Sarah needs to learn that actions have consequences. Dad nodded approvingly. And after that? I looked out the window at the town passing by, the place where I'd grown up, where I'd fallen in love, where I'd been betrayed. It held good memories and bad, but it wasn't the only place in the world. After that, I think I might travel for a while. See some places when I'm not wearing a uniform or carrying a weapon. Figure out who I am when I'm not a husband or a soldier. Sounds like a plan, Dad said, a note of pride in his voice. And you know you've always got a home with me for as long as you need it. I know, Dad. Thanks. I meant it more than he could know. 3 months later, I stood on a beach in Costa Rica, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The legal battle with Sarah had been swift and decisive. Jim had been ruthless once the forgery was proven, and Sarah had ultimately agreed to a settlement that included returning the house to me, plus a substantial portion of the assets she'd liquidated. I'd sold the house immediately, not wanting the memories it contained, and donated most of my recovered possessions to a veteran support organization. Mike had reached out about a month after our confrontation, apologetic and contrite. Sarah had left him too, moving on to a doctor she'd met at her gym. I didn't take pleasure in his pain, but I couldn't find it in myself to offer comfort either. Some betrayals cut too deep for friendship to survive. As for Sarah, I heard through the small-town grapevine that she was telling anyone who would listen that I'd tricked her, that the inheritance had been hidden from her deliberately. Few believed her, especially after the forgery became public knowledge. The last I heard, she was planning to move to California for a fresh start. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Elena, the tour guide I'd met last week who had promised to show me her favorite local restaurant tonight. Unlike Sarah, Elena's smile reached her eyes when she looked at me, and her laugh was genuine, untainted by calculation or deceit. I wasn't ready for another relationship, not yet. But I was ready for friendship, for connection, for the possibility of something more down the road. The inheritance had given me freedom, but it was the betrayal that had given me clarity. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what really matters. As I turned away from the ocean to meet Elena, I felt the weight I'd been carrying for months finally lift completely. Sarah had taken what she thought was everything, but she'd missed the most important things. My resilience, my capacity for joy, and yes, the financial security my grandmother had lovingly provided. But even without the money, I would have survived. Would have rebuilt. Would have found my way back to myself. Because some things can't be taken, no matter how thoroughly someone tries to strip you of your dignity, your history, your sense of self. Some things are simply yours, forever, woven into the fabric of who you are. And in the end, those are the only things that truly matter.